Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. Today we're going to talk about some very successful programs here in Marin County dealing with youth offenders related to drugs and alcohol. Don Carney is a veteran activist in Marin's peace and justice community. He's the founder and director of the YMCA Marin County Youth Court, which has been operating since 2004. Don, thanks for being with us.
Quite welcome.
We've got a lot to talk about. We've seen remarkable success with the Youth Court, which deals with first-time offenders with drug and alcohol offenses. And we've seen the reduction of the recidivism rate, that's so hard to say, the repeat offenders, to 5% or below. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about the principles of peer-to-peer adjudication and restorative justice that are really the foundation of this program.
Okay, let me clarify first. About 80% of our cases are substance-driven in the Marin County Youth Court. And that's because we're an affluent county, and affluence drives access to those kind of substances. But we do take all kinds of cases that kids get involved in.
Okay.
Bullying each other, shoplifting, punching each other in the nose, that kind of thing.
All right.
And because we have a drug and alcohol epidemic in Marin County, we have the highest binge drinking rate, not only of adolescents, but of adults and seniors. People are smoking marijuana that do at twice the rate they do in the national arena, and it's much more potent. So every child that comes through our program, regardless of charge, has to go through a harm reduction program so they learn how to navigate their risk-taking years. So part of our efficacy is due to the peer-to-peer approach and a restorative approach, but married to that is a very strong harm reduction program that helps adolescents learn to navigate their risk-taking successfully.
So let's see if we can walk us through that so people understand what we're talking about. You have a young person gets in trouble for DUI, somehow comes to you. Walk us through what your program does for that fella or girl.
We actually would not take a DUI juvenile case. That would not be given to us.
Okay.
We would take a case of a juvenile under the influence at school, stealing a bottle of liquor out of the supermarket, that kind of thing. And we will get a referral either directly from a police department, directly from probation, or currently directly from schools. We're working very closely with schools currently. That young person and their parent will come for an intake where we explain the program. And it's very important for us to explain we're not part of probation, we're not part of the police department. We are the YMCA, and we are there not to judge or punish, but to help the young person and the family learn how to help their kid navigate their risk-taking years.
So you don't take the DUI. You're looking to help folks who don't get quite to that point. So if a mom or dad is suspicious of what's happening with Bobby, the intervention is to come to you, or how?
Well, rarely do we get a parent who directly refers their kid to us.
Okay.
We do get referrals directly from schools that police are not involved in, and that's been an accomplishment because that creates the opportunity for a true diversion with no paperwork left behind. So a kid will get caught at school high, a kid will get caught in the community stealing some alcohol, and the police department will pick them up. They'll refer directly to the youth court. The parent will come in with the child, we'll explain the program, and then we'll set a court date. The court is totally run by youth. An adult sits as the judge. I have real judges sit as judges and attorneys, but they basically read a script. They can ask a few questions at the conclusion, but the kids ask all the questions. The jury is not passive. It's like a grand jury. They ask questions. Each child that comes in is represented by two advocates, a community advocate and a respondent advocate. We do not engage in a adversarial process. Our process is collaborative. So everybody works together as a team, a very different approach.
So does the individual plead guilty essentially before this jury of peers?
For the individual to be eligible for the program, they have to accept accountability for their poor choice. So they do sign a document that said, yeah, I was righteously busted.
Okay. So then the jury is comprised of peers, and some of these are people who've been in that position before, who went through the program?
Correct. Part of the responsibility, we call it a restorative plan. We don't call it a verdict. We try and have all of the language and processes be supportive rather than punitive. So part of their responsibility is to sit on 2 to 5 juries for others. So the kids are working on both sides of the aisle on the same issue by and large.
Yeah.
Everybody is involved in a teachable moment and taking away some goodies from that experience.
Now, I've been familiar for some time with the idea of victim-offender reconciliation, which falls under this broad label now of restorative justice. And we've seen some major gains in the use of this direct approach of the offender meeting with the victim to understand how I, the offender, harmed a victim and to understand the actual impact of that. So talk a little bit about these principles. One of the things that kind of held me back from embracing it was that one of the early proponents was Chuck Colson, the Watergate criminal who found both a desire to fight for justice and improve the prisons, but also tied it to his own conversion to Christianity. And so I was uncomfortable that Colson tied the process to accepting his version of salvation, if you will.
Even people like that can be served by the restorative process successfully. Don't let that get in your way, Peter. It's very successful to get the state out of the middle of people's disputes. Our jurisprudence system currently does not promote direct contact between perpetrator and victim. Most cases are plea bargained. The first time the victim gets to confront the perpetrator is on a sentencing or parole hearing. So getting the state out of the middle and having a process where people can honestly own the accountability for the harm they've created, create a plan with the victim to repair that harm as much as they possibly can, and to move on is very human and very effective.
But you still use the symbolism of the state in driving home the seriousness, I think, of the offense and the need to restore your responsibility as a full citizen of the county of Marin. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Yes. What's really important is using restorative practices in a courtroom setting. And this is particularly important for kids who have been involved with substance violations. When a kid shoplifts and you say, who have you impacted? It's pretty obvious who they've impacted. When you say, who was impacted by for you being busted high at school? They go, me. I'm the one in trouble. So it takes them quite a while to understand who they've impacted. We tend to take care of that in the Decisions Under the Influence workshop, where we help a child break down, well, if mom came to get you at 3 a.m. in the morning, do you think maybe she was impacted? And it takes them a while to get there. We've focus grouped with our kids, because some proponents in restorative justice say you can't do restorative justice in a hierarchical setting, like a courtroom. And we've focus grouped this with the kids, and they've told us quite frankly, you guys are very restorative, but if you didn't make us get into that witness box, we wouldn't take any of this seriously. Right. So there's something about that experience of being peppered with hundreds of questions by your peers and being in that witness box and being on the hot seat that sort of salient and stays with the unconscious mind.
So could you share with us, these don't have to be verbatim, but some of the exchanges that you have witnessed where an offender is there, these active jurors are saying, well, how often do you come to school high, or things like that. What kind of exchanges are there, and at what point do you see breakthroughs or kind of aha moments?
Well, the strongest breakthroughs are when a former respondent is on the jury asking questions of today's juror that are internal to himself or herself. That's what I mean by them working on both sides of the aisle there. They will ask questions about, are you getting high before school? Are you getting high during school? But more importantly, we're not trying to match the crime with some restorative outcome. What we're trying to do is interview the young person about the rest of their life. Because it is a dispositional hearing, we can go beyond the bad act. And we can take an inventory. What's your family life like? What's your friendship group like? What are you doing after school? What do you need in your life to be more successful, feel better about yourself? And the restorative plan lays out a plan to engage in that, not just matching a particular crime with a particular outcome. In fact, the amount of community service hours that the kids give, it can be between 15 and 45. And we always orient them. The community service hours aren't meant to be a punishment. They're meant to be an opportunity to gain new assets, new capacities, gain some new friends, be in some new environments. So when they give the community service hours, it has to be thoughtful about how it's going to be restorative for this young person.
So unlike a typical arrest where the person gets arrested, then has to appear, and they're either convicted or not convicted and appear again for sentencing, this is a process that goes from a learning group, small groups, I would imagine, sort of almost like a group counseling program or educational program at some level, then a court appearance or a faux court appearance of some kind, and then the consequence, that is a sentence, if you will, of having to do some community service. So what is the average length of time someone is with your program?
From the point of time that the young person is adjudicated in our court, they've got 3 months to complete their sentence. And we provide them with a lot of case management. Our goal is success for this young person.
And if they're unsuccessful, what happens?
If they're unsuccessful, in that 3 months, we try and renegotiate a contract for success with all the parties that are involved. Rarely do we have to return a case to a school or to probation. Occasionally we do that, and then the young person is placed on informal probation.
Don, let's talk a little bit about the role of parents. First of all, in, if you will, creating the environment where their child maybe has access to alcohol, has permission to hold parties with drinking. So we have one set of issues with parents on the offense side, and then I'd like to ask, what is the role of parents on the restorative side in your program?
Well, let's start with big picture. Our grandparents grew up in extended families with a lot of adults caring about them and guiding them and giving them proper values to succeed in the world. And my generation, we had a mom and a dad at home. And Mom did a lot of that work. Today, less than half the households are two-family. Most households are single-family households, mostly run by women. So the opportunity for parents to impact positively kids has structurally shrunk. And institutions have to pick that up. Schools, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club have to develop attachment with kids to give them the proper values. Kids giving each other values are informed by corporations and advertising. Thereafter, picking our wallet through our kids' desire. Our kids' well-being is not their bottom line. So that sets the picture. Now, we have parents who collude terribly with their children. They want to be friends. It's hard to parent an adolescent. They can argue you under the table. They have much more energy than you do. And yet you have to continue to parent them because their frontal lobes are not yet hooked up. And by parenting and setting boundaries, you're lending your child your frontal lobe until they can get their own executive functioning brain. Now, if you're colluding with your kid, it's very confusing to the young person. On the other hand, parents who set strong expectations with their children, who continue to set those expectations through the adolescent years, have much more successful risk-taking children who do not harm themselves or others.
Mm-hmm. And then what is the role of parents in the restorative justice aspect of this?
We insist that if a young person is given the opportunity to have this program, that we get to work with a parent for 6 hours on a Saturday with their child in a group setting.
Mm.
So our Decisions Under the Influence workshop has two large components. One is a 6-hour component with the kids and the parents together, where we learn to talk cross-generationally, respectfully about drugs and alcohol and what's going on in Marin. We have guest speakers who have experienced the downside of drugs and alcohol. We watch a couple of films, one specifically on binge drinking in Marin, another on the teenage brain. And then we go through a literal role play on how to survive another day when you've done something your parents wish you hadn't done. Mm-hmm. Then we do 3 teen-only sessions for 2 hours apiece on the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where we make them ambassadors of restorative justice. We help them understand how their drug violation really does impact others, and that's a bit of a task. We teach them about myths around drugs and alcohol that are lethal. For instance, kids are buying something on the street called fizz. They think it's MDMA or ecstasy, and it's really 90% methamphetamine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we teach them to go on the websites and see exactly what's in that pill.
It's called fizz?
Fizz.
Okay, first time I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's because we're older, Peter. The street may have changed in the last 6 months. Those things do change quickly.
Yeah.
We also go over police procedure. Young people do not know how to handle themselves on a police investigation. We let them know what their civil rights are under those circumstances and how to request those in a way that won't dig the hole deeper, which is often the case. Hmm. That aspect really emboldens our trust with each other. The last day we take their drug inventory. What was the first drug they've ever taken? How much did they take? How long did they take it? How did that work for them? Second, third, fourth. What are you curious about that you haven't taken? And that's very interesting, the teen crosstalk about that. Mm-hmm. Then we ask them, where are you going to draw the line and why? And then we draw a very strong distinction between self-medicating and recreating. Most kids who are engaged in experimenting will recreate with substances until about their mid-20s, and then it declines enormously. But unfortunately, access and bad luck can lead to death. I have had 6 kids I've worked with very closely who were not addicts, but just access met bad luck, and they expired.
Mm-hmm. So this is a program with lots of moving parts, it sounds like. And it also doesn't sound like a program like this comes cheap. So how are you funded? Where do you get your money? Is the Y picking up the tab? Is the Marin County Court picking up the tab? And is there some anticipation that the participants in the program are going to pick up some of the tab?
We do charge on a sliding scale. The bottom end of the scale is $150. The top end of the scale is $700. We do not turn any family away. We have some money set aside for scholarships that comes from the supervisor's fund. So we do get some support from the supervisors.
Is that discretionary fund that everyone's complaining
well,
about?
Now it's got a new name and everybody's feeling better about it.
That's good.
It always did a lot of good, actually.
Anyway, but that doesn't pick up the whole boat.
No, I have several philanthropists who are very generous with the program and support the program, and the YMCA helps as much as they can. Mm-hmm. But we are fairly self-sufficient.
Do you have a website that people could look at?
Absolutely.
What is that?
You can go to the Marin YMCA website and drill down until you find the youth court. Or you can go on YouTube, and we've got 2 pieces on YouTube. We've got one called the Marin County Youth Court, which is our newest documentary, and another one just called Youth Court, which is a documentary we did about 5 years ago for the Teaching Channel.
Mm. And so in the first 5 years, you had 432 juveniles who were tried through your program. 415 of those completed the program and did not reoffend. That is a 4% recidivism rate. That is remarkable, Don.
Well, it's a combination of things. One is teaching adolescents how to think clearly about the risks they take. Most kids get busted at school or in cars with other kids. So we try and make it obvious to them, where are you getting busted? Think about that. So that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are not going drug-free because of the experience. We're dealing with kids who are in the front end of their experimentation. They are not ready for abstinence. What we teach them is survival skills around these substances. And the one thing I've been working really hard with and wasn't aware of when this data was developed was the impact of marijuana on the developing brain, costing roughly 8 IQ points that you never get back.
Which brings up a question that we had, is that it may be that the legalization of marijuana in California is just around the corner. At some point it may be on the ballot. What is your feeling on legalization of drugs, and how would that, not drugs, of marijuana, and how that would affect your programs?
Well, legalization would keep me in business forever, unfortunately. I saw the age of onset drop 18 months with medical marijuana. If we legalize marijuana, it becomes normalized in the culture. We're going to be looking at 10 and 11-year-old kids smoking marijuana. That's unacceptable. And marijuana, for a young person, if they're involved with marijuana, that can be their total involvement. It makes them feel great, puts money in their pocket if they're engaged in a little bit of entrepreneurship, and they feel like they've got the world by the tail. What they're cutting off is their own internal dopamine telling them what they're passionate about. And I think that is the biggest loss that adolescents have when they're awashed with THC. They can't feel their own internal dopamine saying, gee, you really would make a great engineer, or you'd really make a great artist, or you'd really make a good third baseman. In fact, what really caught my attention quite recently is I had 3 kids from a government class from Terra Linda. Their assignment was to develop a policy that would help their peers. And they quickly, all 3 of them were Latin kids, they quickly understood what they wanted. And they identified that so many of their friends around the 9th or 10th grade chose marijuana over college. And they were very frustrated about this. So we brainstormed an approach, and what they did is they circulated a petition amongst their peers asking if the peers would ask adults not to endorse legalization. Within 2 weeks, they had 400 signatures. So if kids are feeling this internally in their own set of friends, we know there's an opportunity to get out in front of this and at least frame the campaign. I want to get out and frame the campaign before the pro people frame it as, why are we throwing people in jail for dope and we can use the tax money. I want to frame it as, hey, you can't keep this out of people's hands who are under 21, which the feds require for legalization, which is a ludicrous dream. Colorado can't do it, we can't do it. And now we know it hurts kids' brains. So we're going to start a poster campaign on schools, don't be dumb.
What do you think, what's your best estimate of the average age of kids in Marin using marijuana for the first time?
We're talking age of onset of somewhere between the 7th and 8th grade. For the kids experimenting, that's the majority start at that point.
So, Don, last fall, voters passed Proposition 47, which rewrote some of the sentences for drug offenders. Many have been able to shorten their sentences. Some have been released already. The impact has been somewhat positive in terms of the prison and jail population. But Sheriff Doyle here in Marin expressed his opposition to it. And I've also heard from some people in the rehabilitation community that not being able to at least threaten to send a chronic offender or abuser to prison or jail loses leverage for them. What's your reaction and what's your position on 47?
I think Prop 47 is a good law. I don't think minor possession charges should be charged as felonies. And I don't really believe if you're forced into recovery, you're going to embrace recovery authentically. I think some recovery centers are missing the opportunity to deal with court-mandated people who also come with a check. That may be more motivational than determining the efficacy of working with somebody who's not prepared for that journey.
Don, with just about a minute remaining, what would you like to tell our viewers about your program? And we didn't really touch on the alternatives to school suspension that is being used in both middle schools and high schools in the county. But take the minute here to run down what you're doing and give people resource access.
Well, as we try and keep kids out of prison, we're drilling down further and further. Suspension of a kid in color in middle school is the highest predictor of them ending up in juvenile justice and not completing school. So diverting suspensions is very important. And we're about to go even deeper on truancy. Particularly kids who are truant very early in life tend to drop out of school later in life, tend to end up in the juvenile justice and then the adult system. We're very lucky to have a probation department that is very insightful and very pro-restorative practices. I can't say enough good things about Mike Daly and our probation department here in Marin County. At this point, it's as good as it can get.
Great. Well, Don, thank you for joining us, and it's been fascinating to learn about the work you're doing and some of the great success that you've achieved with the YMCA Youth Court here in Marin County. Thank you, Don Carney.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Don.